Okay, again, I'm Greg Goodland from the Rio Grande National Forest, and I'd like to welcome everybody to this session of the Forest Specialist Series, where we're going to be talking with a panel of our very valuable seasonal employees, as we call them seasonal, often referred to as temporaries, but the folks that get the actual work done, the office slugs like me, we're just here to help them do what they do. So we got a couple of special things that we want to talk about first, and that is maintenance. And so I will introduce you to my host from the San Juan Mountains Association, and that is Hannah Fake. Hannah, tell us about what's going to happen today.
Yeah, so welcome everyone. I'm Hannah. I'm with the San Juan Mountains Association. I'm the visitor information coordinator here on the forest for them. I work out of the Divide District in Del Norte, in our Del Norte office. So our Forest Specialist Series, we host this once a month. We provide information to the community about what's going on in our forests. And this week we are lucky enough to have lots of specialists who do all sorts of different things this summer. And we're going to hear from all of them. Each person's going to kind of share a little bit about what they do and what they've seen out there. And then we'll, of course, have lots of time for questions and asking folks what they've been doing and getting up to, if you have anything specific for them or just in general on the forest. So a few little housekeeping things. We ask everyone to keep muted. So that's that bottom little microphone button at the on the bottom screen there. Unless you are speaking, that kind of helps keep down on our background noise. If you want to turn your video on and off, there's the video camera button. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. You can either message everyone. So if you click on that chat bubble button, there'll be a blue drop down and you can choose the individual person in particular, or you can message to everyone in the group. If you are interested in our drawing, we have, let's see, we've got a tree book and another one about wooden canvas. So it is, let's see if I can get it in here. Maybe not. Oh, there we go. We'll put your name in for the drawing, so you can either message me directly or you can just put your name in the chat to everyone, maybe introduce yourself and where you're from, and we will all do that drawing at the end. And let's see, I think that's about it. If you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat throughout and we can ask our specialist right then and there, or we can always save them until the end. We'll have a big question session then for everyone. So today we'll have Marv Hatton from our motorized trail crew, then Jordan from archaeology, Adrian who does developed rec, Cassidy who works in hydrology, David who's working as a forestry tech, and then Kirby who's on our wilderness trails crew. So we'll hear from lots of folks today across the forest doing all different things. So I'm really excited and I hope you all are too. So with that, I think I'll pass it off to Marv if he wants to get started, unless we got something else, Greg. Did I miss anything?
Yeah, I just came up. I just wanted to advise folks that we really would like this to be as interactive as possible. So if you've got questions, don't hold back. Come on up, turn your camera on. If you don't want to, that's fine, but unmute your mic and ask some questions away. We would request that it's at appropriate time, of course, but let's have this as interactive as we can and have a good time with it. So with that, I guess I'll send it back to you, Marv. Welcome. And okay. What do you do?
What do I do? We are the Rio Grande National Forest motorized crew. We're responsible for all the single track and 50-inch or ATV trails in the district. We've got 91 miles of single track and in excess of 150 miles of 50-inch trail that we maintain. So that's anywhere from digging in the dirt and making drains to cutting trees. Primarily this summer it was cutting trees. Bump into a lot of visitors, have a lot of good conversations throughout the day with trail users. So it's pretty cool. It's a pretty unique opportunity to have a job like that. Yep, there you go. That's my motorcycle right there. That's actually me with the chainsaw. Where'd you get those pictures?
Magic.
Yeah,
No, Bryce sent him over.
so you can see that's actually Shady Creek Trail. And got rumors just yesterday from a trail user that there's about 60 more trees down on that trail. Took them 2 hours to navigate. We've ridden that trail 3 times this summer. So, yeah, it's quite a job. I can't imagine what the winter will bring. I can't imagine what a good strong windstorm will bring because those trees are ripe to tip over right now. So anybody got any questions, lay them on me.
So Marv, why don't you talk just a minute about why you're riding a motorcycle? Why, I like walking on trails, man.
We do walk as well, but we've got so many miles to cover, it's just more efficient to use the motorcycle. I don't think we would get all those trails done without it. Because, a trail maybe I'm looking at my chart, some of the trails are 3 miles long, some of them are 11 miles long. So it's just more efficient.
So if you're able to take that motorcycle in, sure, maybe you can't get all the way in today, and then that means you'd have to hike in the rest of the way just before you could even start working tomorrow, right?
Yep. Yeah, and with 3 of us, we actually leapfrogged. So you'll see Stephen there with the chainsaw. He'll be cutting and somebody else will go forward and we'll just leapfrog our way up the trail and get it clear. And then we've always got one guy that's a swamper that helps throw the debris out of the way. So we don't each have a chainsaw because you have to have a swamper. So we generally have one gas powered chainsaw and one electric chainsaw.
So like what I'm seeing in this picture then, Marv, who is it cutting there?
That's Stephen Clutter.
Okay, so he's gonna cut, and then you said you have a swamper. That's somebody that's gonna take those logs.
Either
and
myself or Heinrich will throw the stuff out of the way so we can move on to the next one.
and
And
how
if you
far back do you
look how
throw it?
gnarly those trees are. What's that?
How far back do you throw it?
Just off of the trail. I would like to say that we could get rid of it, but some of our trails are beginning to look like little tunnels because there's so much debris to the side of them. It's horrible.
Wow.
And it'd be nice to say you could haul it out of there and put it in somebody's wood pile, but that wouldn't be practical.
Not 4 miles up a trail, would it be?
Right. And then you can see Heinrich with his trail tool there that quite often will have water intrusion on the trail. So it's our job to redirect the water. Our motto is keep the water off and keep the people on. So, any other questions?
I have a question for you. So do you guys,
Jordan.
when you're doing trail maintenance, do you go out on certain days and your objective is just to clear trees, or do you tend to do whatever trail maintenance that you come across as far as rock work or water work or any of that?
Our goal is always to do all the trail maintenance, but we get so wrapped up in clearing trees that quite often, yes, we tend to ignore some of the groundwork. And then we'll have to go back at a later date and pick up on some of the groundwork. Because I hate to start a trail and not finish it and make it clear for the trail users. I don't think it would look good to cut halfway through and then back out. So this time of the year, now that we've got most of the trails clear, yes, we're hiking in and doing a lot of groundwork.
Well, that's awesome. Cool job, Marv. Cool
Yeah.
job.
People ask when they can have my job. I tell them when I die.
I think that's probably a good plan.
I feel pretty fortunate that I have this job because it's unheard of that you get paid for one, riding a dirt bike, two, being in the national forest and getting paid for running a chainsaw. And we have one of the most beautiful forests there is, so. Pretty
Even
cool.
with the dead trees, right?
Even you gotta look beyond the dead trees, because there is a lot of life in our mountains.
Oh, big time. Big time. Love hearing that. So one last question. We'll change it over to the next panelist. Marv, what do you do in the winter?
I'm a
Off season, I should say.
I have got about 50 years worth of auto repair experience. So I own and operate a small engine repair shop. And so all winter long, I'm working on everything from chainsaws to weed whackers to ATVs, motorcycles. So that's my winter job.
Lawnmowers?
Yep, lawnmowers.
Oh, man. I'm going to get your number real quick here, bud.
Yep. No, you're welcome. If it's got a spark plug, I can usually make it run.
Fair enough.
Except for David Wheeler, he's got a mystery thing on my bench that him and I are going to work on together. David
I don't
is
think I
into
wanna ask.
antique chainsaws.
Fair enough.
I like
All
vintage.
right. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just saying, I like vintage chainsaws, so I have an old 70s model home light that Marv and I are going to work on this winter.
Nice. Enjoy that. It's a challenge, right?
It'll be a challenge.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you, Marv. And Hannah, go ahead and introduce the next one.
Yeah, so next we have Jordan up. She's going to be sharing a little bit about what she does. Switching gears a bit too.
All right, well, I am Jordan Neely. I am in my 6th season here on the Rio as an archaeologist technician. And so I bet a lot of people don't know that the National Forest does employ archaeologists. So we're required, in order for any new projects to get done on the forest, we've got to go through and look for any sort of cultural resources. So anything that is historic or prehistoric, we've got to check for those. And if we find them, we record them and then make basically a determination of significance. So we decide, is this something that is significant and needs to be protected? Or is this something that we don't need to continue to manage? And so essentially we hike a lot off of trails, actually. Most of our projects, we have to investigate our timber sales, but we also have to look into any project that's going to disturb the ground surface in a new way. So, we just heard from Marv. This year, we had a trail expansion project for motorized use to take something from a single track trail to a 50-inch. And so we had to go and survey along that since they'll be widening the trail there and make sure that there's, no historic activity or no Native American activity. So the picture that's on the screen is a piece that I actually found this summer during one of our surveys for what we call a WUI project, which is a wildland and urban interface. It's essentially a fuels management to try and put in some fire breaks around private property. And so that is hard to say how old it is for sure, at least a couple of thousand years. It's a preform for either a atlatl point or a spear point. So that was kind of a neat find we had this year. Let's see what else. we also tend to look into if there's any structures that are going to get either refurbished or updated here on the forest. So we investigate some cabins now and then, document those to try and preserve their historic integrity. This next photo, where I'm holding the little piece of, just kind of looks like brownish rock, that's actually a piece of pottery that we also found this summer. And the neat thing about that piece is that you can't see it very well in the picture, but it has sort of this gold glittering finish to it. And that's a specific pottery type that was only made in the Taos Pueblo. So in that particular site, we were actually working on the same WUI project and found that. So we know that the people from the Taos Pueblo were on that spot when they came up. And then that next picture just outlines kind of a unusual project we had this year. We had to survey for a outfitter who guides hunters, and they wanted to shift one of their camps to a better location. So we actually had to go survey that, since they're going to have a large number of people and horses and tents in one area. We had to go up and check that out, make sure there was nothing important there up Pole Creek. So that's a nice overview of the trail we hiked up Pole Creek after driving up Timber Hill. If anyone's familiar with Timber Hill, that was a fun 3 hours in the pickup. But then we got to hike in and see some really beautiful country. So that's in a nutshell, that's what we do. We're essentially we go a little bit of everywhere. We're based out of the SO in Monte Vista for now. It's moving to Del Norte. But we go all over the forest, all 3 districts, wherever they want to get something done, we tend to go. So I see a lot of variety from day to day, I would say. And I think that's about all that I've got. If there's any questions.
I have a question.
Okay.
So that previous photo, I thought that was Miners Creek.
Oh
That
yeah,
look-
does it look real similar?
Yeah, there's a rock outcropping up at the end of Miners Creek that looks just like that.
Huh, interesting.
But I've also seen the one up Pole Creek too, and it caught me off guard. I really thought it was Miners Creek.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I was kind of at a sort of a weird spot, but yeah, I was right there just after you go through kind of the narrow canyon at the start of that Pole Creek trail, and then you get there's kind of that flat open area right before the stream narrows back up. And yeah, it was right in that area. And it definitely, the photo makes it look far larger and more impressive than you actually notice it in person.
Okay, you tricked me.
Well, I haven't been up Miners Creek this year, so.
Have you
Yeah,
been up
it's-
there?
I think several years ago, but not
Yeah.
recently.
Yeah, it's a real similar, kind of looks like a Wheeler Monument type
Mhm.
rock.
Yep.
Cool.
I've got a question for you, Jordan. Do you often go out overnight when you're going way far up to these places, or are you just making day trips?
So it depends. So my supervisor gives us a little bit of freedom in kind of deciding what's practical. I think every season that I've been on, we've done at least one overnight stint somewhere. I don't think I've ever, well, maybe there was one year where we did 2 or 3. So it really depends where we're going. That particular trip we did, we stayed out at basically near the end of where the road was good for that particular trip, just so that way we could get an early start for that rough section. But yeah, I would say about every year there's usually one project where we end up, we either have several days worth of work up there, and so we just stay. Frequently we stay in Swatch Park because that's such a trip up there. So it depends. For me personally, I tend to not stay out a lot because I have livestock at home. that needs checked in most every day. So if I'm gone, then I have to have somebody checking them, but it's definitely a possibility.
I had a quick question. Hey, totally cool. I'm kind of geeking out on the archaeology stuff. But I want to know what the most common artifacts that you find are, for one. And then obviously this could be really long, so shorten as needed. But what are a little synopsis of cultures that have come through the forest?
Yeah, absolutely. So the most common thing that varies very much by what area we're in. But I would say we frequently get what we call, flakes. So the little bits of chips or debitage that come off the rock when they're making stone tools, like projectile points or knives. So we come across that. That's probably our most frequent site that we come across, as far as where we have a collection, of more than just one artifact in an area. That's what we call a site. And so, yeah, things involving those little flakes or lithic debitage from prehistoric people, that's probably one of our most common sites. But in certain areas, we come across a ton of prospect pits. In the really mountainous areas, you'll have, sometimes 10 or 15 of those on one project if you're in kind of a cluster. And then, in other areas, if there's a little bit more historic activity, cans and bottled glasses, that kind of thing. So it really varies. As far as the cultures that have come through the forest, we have a really long history of occupation in the area. So not necessarily the forest, but the San Luis Valley as a whole has one of the densest concentrations of known Paleo-Indian sites and artifacts. And so that is basically as early as it gets in North America. That's the Clovis and Folsom period people, which is 12 to 10,000 years ago. And we do have some of those sites on the forest that we know about. So we get a really good record starting about 10,000 years ago. And people have been here pretty much ever since. So we have a lot of what we call archaic period sites. And so those are typically about 8,000 years ago to around 2,000 years ago. And then we have what we kind of call the late prehistoric, which goes, from 2,000 years ago to about 150 years ago, little less than 150 even. And so those prehistoric people are a lot of the tribes, that we can identify today. So Price, who is my supervisor, has a more complete list of all the tribes that we're required to consult with, who have some sort of claim here, but the most common of those are the Southern Ute and the Ute Mountain Ute. And then we also have quite a bit of interest from the Northern New Mexico Pueblos, from the Jicarilla Apache, which also have a reservation in Northern New Mexico, and even some Navajo. Actually, we do consult with the Navajo. Mount Blanca is their northern most sacred mountain for their ancestral homeland areas. So there's been prehistorically, people basically from 10,000 years ago onward throughout the San Luis Valley, largely nomadic. We don't have any much evidence of, permanent villages or anything here. And then of course, miners started coming in. We had Spaniards who were coming through the valley too, in the mid 1600s. And then, in the early to mid 1800s, you had fur trappers, followed by miners, and then of course, the rest of the settlers. So lots of cultural happenings over a long period of time.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you so much.
Yep. No problem.
That's amazing, Jordan. And what I'm hearing from you is I want more and more and more. So I think we figured out one of our next forest specialist series right now. I hate like heck to cut you off, but in fairness to everybody else, we got to do that.
Oh, so. Yeah. No worries. It's a fun job and it's very interesting. even on the days where you're just hiking, steep timber for hours and don't find anything, at least, you're out in the mountains and usually have a pretty good office view. So
Yeah, I bet. I'm jealous. I've told you that though. Cool. Well, before I send you off, what do you do in the off season?
yeah, so I have a couple different hats that I wear in the off season. I grew up here on a farm, and so I help my parents out with that still. And then I have my own meat goat herd that I manage. I have almost 100 head of females for that. And then I also get to work with 4-H youth. I have a paid position with them as well that luckily runs kind of during the school year. So I get to do that when I'm not working with the forest.
Anybody that supports 4-H is big in my book. Thank you for that. Appreciate it, Jordan.
It's lots of fun.
Hannah, go ahead. I just realized you put it up in the chat though. Cool.
Yeah, so next we have Adrian, and I'll let him introduce himself a little further.
All right. So I'm a developed rec tech working in the northern part of the forest. And a lot of my experience is unique because I'm able to be on the forest a lot while also working to help improve others' experience on the forest. So it's really enjoyable to know that the work I'm doing is helping other people respect our forest more or be able to enjoy whatever they're doing on the forest a little bit more, even if it's just a little. That helps a lot. And a lot of what I do is cleaning facilities on campgrounds and guard stations. Those are definitely the most regular things I do. The guard stations, we often rent out to people for weekends and then have a few weekdays during the week to clean them, which is really enjoyable. Cleaning out the campgrounds is good. And then it's a great way to have interaction with the public because there's always people using the campsites or using the trailheads that are right next to the campground. So it's a lot of good experience going to those. And a lot of my time is spent checking roads that have been closed or aren't used very often to make sure that no one's like making mud pits on them or camping in places they're not supposed to be. Making sure all the dispersed campsites we have stay clean. That's a big thing we do. That's a lot of the main roads we use on the forest, like the roads that a lot of our campsites are on. They get so much access throughout the season that it's really important to keep an eye on the places where they wash out and a few other spots. A few of the roads are definitely hard to keep up with. They take a lot more work than others. So apart from cleaning and maintenance, we have more like involved projects that we do pretty often. One of the more recent ones we did was at one of our campsites. There's no shade at all, so we go down there and we built these shade structures that definitely have helped improve the experience people are having during hunting season now that started. And another one is we removed beaver damage. The beaver set up a dam near one of our guard stations, and it actually ended up flooding a big part that we use for storing materials. So we actually had to dismantle that dam, and luckily the beaver set up a dam further down the stream, which is really nice to know. I think a lot of these projects we do help a lot with people seeing that we care about the forest that we're working on, and that we're checking them frequently and making sure they're having a good experience all around. And yeah, public interaction is definitely a big part of my job, from driving to campsites or driving to guard stations, or even just meeting up with someone on a random road that I'm just checking for garbage they might be ATVing on. And often people will be asking for directions or hunting and fishing regulations. And especially now during hunting season is ramping up, rifle season's about to start, where I'm bringing a lot of like literature that has regulations on them that I don't often know the answer to. So a lot of my time is spent finding people that just need assistance on the roads. And a lot of times I don't have answers for the questions they're asking, which often I have to refer them to the ranger office where we are right now. And there's a lot more details and information here. But when I do have the answer, it's super fulfilling to be able to provide them that answer right away and know that I helped someone experience the forest in a better way. Oh, occasionally I really enjoy doing trail work when I get the opportunity to do that. And it's super enjoyable to go up on these trails and clear trees or any water damage on the trail, set up a water bar. Because a lot of the times a tree down on the trail could mean a stopping point for some people. Like if someone's has trouble climbing over things, or if they're on a horse, that could be a big issue. So knowing that the removal of the trees that we have is helping people continue on the trail and not stopping their day is really nice. Probably my favorite part about doing trails is we often aren't using chainsaws, we're using hand saws and our crosscut saw, which has a much less impact on the environment, noise pollution, air pollution wise, and a lot less to carry in, which is really nice for us. One thing I really have enjoyed as just part of this job in general is pretty much everybody I work with is like-minded in their respect for nature and the forest. And it's super refreshing being able to work around people like that. And I think that increases my motivation to do a good job and really try my best every day at work. And these pictures actually, that salamander, I saw it on a road in the morning and it was super moist out, and I never see any small animals like that. I have been lucky this season seeing a lot of wildlife. This is my second season working for the forest. So from that salamander, there was dozens of them on that road, to that rattlesnake, which I actually saw recently, which is a good story because I was cleaning one of our guard stations and I was just out for lunch, walking around, going to check on the stream to see if there was fish in it. And I ended up finding a badger and a rattlesnake, and I was able to actually get them both in the same video, which I see Hannah just pulled up, which is really super interesting. Yeah, the badger wasn't in too much of a rush. It was just sauntering its way up the hill. It's actually the third badger I've seen this season, which is another thing I really enjoy, is the opportunity to be out on these roads and at these campsites you don't often get to, and see these wildlife that very few people would have the opportunity to see because they're usually just passing through these areas. And I think the experience of seeing multiple badgers this season, seeing a rattlesnake, it kind of highlights for me how our forest has a lot of danger on it, but a lot of beauty. And it's definitely important that we need to respect both the danger and the beauty of the forest from a distance. Does anyone have any questions?
I want to know if you pissed off the snake or the badger.
I think I might have scared the badger, and the snake seemed like it was either sleeping or just hoping I didn't see it at all. It was staying as still as it possibly could.
Yeah, those videos are pretty fun. Thanks for sharing.
Absolutely.
So, what got you interested in working in recreation, or what kind of background did you have to get that job?
So my first experience working in Colorado was working for AmeriCorps, and I started on a pesticide crew, which got me out on just in the middle of nowhere, spraying invasives, and just seeing the effects of my work almost immediately, like going back a week later and seeing all these dead invasives and smaller plants starting to take back over, native plants, was extremely gratifying, more than any other job I had had in the past. And so I moved on to working for a saw crew for AmeriCorps. And that made me fall in love with working together with people on a crew, having like the same goal, the drive to get the work done. And my first season for the Forest Service just showed me that that's exactly what I'm looking for and what I'm getting working here. Being able to work with the full rec staff, like coordinating with them on projects, occasionally working on trails, understanding more aspects about the forest and how complicated it is to maintain everything with multiple different, we have range, we have timber, there's rec. There's so much that goes into the planning of each project and the planning of even every day of work. And I really enjoy that everyone cares so much about all the work we're doing.
Cool to be a part of it, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I mean, at whatever level we do, I think I hope that as all you pass through your careers, you'll find that coolness of what you're doing and understanding that it's a role that needs played in a machine that's colossally larger than any one of us, right?
For sure.
I mean, yeah, cool stuff. All right, Adrian, what's your off season looking like?
My off season is probably going to be land surveying, actually out in the Eagle Vale area. That's what I did last winter, and I enjoyed being outside and exploring a whole new valley.
I was just in Eagle last weekend.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, it's a beautiful area.
That is a cool area. I have a friend of mine that worked for the Forest Service out of the Eagle Ranger District, and we had a mountain bike race there last weekend. So that's what.
Oh, that's fun.
Well, thank you, sir, for coming on. Any other questions for Adrian? All right, and I don't think I'll make Hannah come on, but she can if she wants.
Go for it, Greg.
I had already muted again. Sorry, Hannah. All right. Thanks again, Adrian. And bringing up now Cassidy Fisher-Price, who I call Cassie. So if you guys get confused, it's me that's confused.
Well, only my mother calls me Cassidy Fisher-Price, and she only does that when I'm in trouble. So Cassie's a lot better for me because I can never be in trouble if nobody says my full name. But yes, hello. I work for the Rio Grande National Forest as a hydraulic technician. Many people just say hydrotech because if you stare at the word hydraulic technician too long, you'll want to say it about 10 different times. I think this is my 4th season on the Rio Grande this year. One of my primary duties is working on best management practices. We've actually almost finished all of our best management practices for this year. So we call these BMPs for short. Every year, the Rio Grande has 10 BMPs that are selected, analyzed, and we physically go visit. These sites are sent down from region. They pick a bunch of different categories, and then we go through and randomly select sites to actually analyze. A lot of times we go to these sites with 2 or more people. This is actually one of my favorite parts of the job because it gives me a great chance to see how things are done in other departments and areas on our forest. When coworkers are actually able to travel with me, it makes for an excellent day in the field where I get to learn about what they do and what else the Forest Service does. It's kind of a whirlwind because when you ride with me, you always expect about a bajillion questions because my brain just likes to ask a lot of questions on these things. And then, so BMPs require a lot of GIS prep work. I do a lot of research and then file searching to actually prepare for the BMP before we go into field. Sometimes I have to create a brand new database to actually do these things. And sometimes I'm really lucky. I actually have a database that's already prepared for me and I don't have to make one from scratch. After these sites are selected, I'll make a map and then I work with others to kind of fill out. We have a pretty long form where we ask a whole bunch of different questions on basically what was the project, what was done, what kind of things were implemented to protect water and soil resources on these areas. Then I organize a plan, and then we go out and visit the sites. These sites can include wildfire areas. We did some campgrounds this year, a lot of timber. Unfortunately, timber almost always gets stuff every year. Same with roads. We go out a lot and look at our roads and see how we're implementing our ditches. You know, did the timber sale close this or that correctly? Or, you know, are there things that we could improve on that site? Is generally what we look for when we go out and take a look at those sites. I take a whole bunch of photos when we go to those sites. This first video, or this first photo, is actually from a site we just recently did. I had someone from Timber go out with us. It was really great. He's always really great. He does a lot of communicating with me. But this was actually a really small wetland that nobody knew about. But when they put, what you can see here is a skid trail, they had to put that right beside it due to just how things were working. So we went out and made sure that everything was okay. But it's a really interesting site because it's a spring-fed wetland, and honestly, wetlands are just really, really cool and really pretty, and it's always exciting to get out, to go out and see those. Occasionally, we found wetlands kind of tucked away in little tiny bowls way out in the middle of the forest. It's some of the favorite things I come across to go see. My second primary duty is that I get to plan and execute soil surveys for timber sales. The Rio Grande Forest performs a pre-harvest and a post-harvest survey. These surveys can occur before cutting, and then they occur again between 2 and 5 years after the cutting has finished. Sometimes I plan both the pre-harvest and the post-harvest surveys. This year I was really lucky. I only had to plan, I don't know if it was really lucky because I had a lot of them, but I got to plan all of the post-harvest surveys. And these surveys always start with a GIS analysis where I take a look at a soil type layer, a geology layer, and then I create a custom slope layer for each timber sale. I use all of that to kind of figure out exactly where I want to go into field before I go. A lot of these timber sales are so large that one person like me can't actually view everything that we'd want to look at. So I use a slope layer and the soils layer to kind of narrow down where the best possible locations to analyze would be. I spend time in the field with my shovel, and I take a really good look at the forest floor, the soil makeup, and I try to track any observable effects I find as I travel across the area. I use what's called the Forest Soil Disturbance Monitoring Protocol, or FSDMPs, for field analysis. And this is a special form with a really well-developed method based on really excellent scientific research. It's a scientific research paper, but it's really interesting, I find anyways. I know a lot of people would find it dry, but so when I go out there, things that I tend to look for when I'm looking at the soil is going to be looking at compaction or any kind of rutting. I look for burning within the soil. I look for forest floor depth. So that's just like a really small, sometimes it can be a really small or a really large duff layer with it's, I believe it's the A or the O horizon, where it's just a mixing of between basically where the duff layer is starting to turn into soil. And we also have a really special spot on our form for if we find any worms. And worms are kind of like, they're kind of like little gold nuggets because you so rarely see them. It's literally like trying to pick out a needle in a haystack, but I've gotten 2 worms this year. So as weird as that is, it's kind of exciting as well. But these surveys are used to determine the current condition for surveys across the survey area. And then a post-harvest survey is used to determine how much change has occurred due to timber or other activities. I also get to go up and collect a water sample from the Wolf Creek ski area every week. I do a bunch of random things around the office. I file things away, I digitize, I work on extra projects. And if anybody ever needs help with GIS, I really enjoy working with GIS. So I tend to help people if they come to me and are not really sure what to do. Yeah, and I think the one story I've got is that my very first year, we had a field visit. We stayed overnight, and basically our very first night, I brought up aliens, politics, and Bigfoot because to me, that's the best gauge of a person. So your response to me based on what you think about aliens, politics, and Bigfoots, I know everything I'm ever going to need to know about you. And it sparked amazing conversation I did not expect from the people I went with, but it was all in great fun, and everybody seemed to have a lot of fun with this super weird conversation we had. Any questions? Sorry, I'm done.
Yeah, I have a question. This is Dave Jones. What happens to all the data that you generate with these reports? Does it stay in the forest or does it go back to regional? And then also, how does regional select the sites? Is it sort of random, or they have certain things that they're looking for?
So every year, I believe what happens is that region or the Washington office, so it's structured the Washington, then region, and then us. So from my understanding is that Washington dictates that every region picks a prominent category. So like veg management, we'll do a lot of veg management one year, or we'll do a bunch of roads one year. I don't really know how they pick that, but once we finish collecting the data for the BMPs, I upload them into a database and we retain those files on site for, 30 years is our retention period. But region will, as far as I know, if we find any issues, region reaches down to the forest and says, hey, these things are issues. We need to go and take a look at these and fix them. As far as the soil stuff, I actually don't know. Beyond us retaining the files, I don't know that region collects or does anything with our files. It's merely something we use for the for like environmental assessments or categorical exclusions. These are just some kinds of NEPA analysis. So after we've collected the data, we just keep it here on site and make sure that we have it if it's ever needed.
Okay, thanks.
When you find worms, do they tend to be in one particular soil type, or are they kind of all over?
They're kind of all over. I've actually only ever found 3 worms my entire time. So I found 2 of those this year, which yeah, it's totally random, and I don't even know what's on the form, but it's sorry. Sorry, new puppies, and she didn't want to be locked out of the room. She sat there whining for a while. But yes, it's kind of random. I can't say that I had noticed if worms were found in a consistent soil type or not. They weren't, as far as I noticed.
Thank you for the answer.
Thanks, Cassidy. That was great. If anyone has any other questions, chime right in. If not, we're going to move on to David, who is coming from the forestry side. So we heard a little bit of what Cassidy does in terms of that, but we'll hear a little more from David.
Yeah, hi, I'm David Wheeler, and I work currently in the Swatch district, and I do work with the timber department as a forestry technician. Specifically, I prepare timber sales mostly, or other management projects. So that could be timber stand improvements, which might look like a thinning project, which could be either hand thinning with chainsaws, a crew with chainsaws, or bringing in machinery and masticating the kind of target species, or getting them to kind of a percentage that we're looking for in that particular stand. But I've been working with the Forest Service since 2015, seasonally. I started out in range management, actually, on the Route Medicine Bow, so in the northwestern part of this state. and then into Wyoming. And so at the end of that season, I was kind of able to use my last pay period to kind of do an audit of the different departments. So I got to go out and do project work with the fire engine there. I got to go out and mark timber with the timber crew there. I got to work on trails, some of which I had done during my college years. I worked through AmeriCorps with the Conservation Corps, and we did backcountry trails. So that was all neat. But what I do now is I'll be the boots on the ground. I'll go and follow maps which are created by foresters, kind of for target areas that need some sort of management. And so I'll be, depending on what the project is, I'll be looking at terrain. Maybe that would be natural breaks for the units that are going to get managed or operated in. And so that could be looking for the amount of timber, it could be looking for the timber type, and then also gauging the slope to see what kind of operation could be done there. Then we usually follow it up by laying out the units with flagging, followed by painting those. And then we'll go on and GPS those boundaries. And then that'll be often followed. We do this both before we lay out the units, but then also after we lay out the units, we'll go in and do surveys and look. So for a timber sale, we'd be looking at the amount of volume and species that's in the stand. And so that requires measuring trees, both the height and then the diameter at breast height, which is 4.5 feet. And then also the number of trees in the species. And so we've done some of all of those things this year. And then we are also in charge of inspecting the contractors, whether they be loggers or masticators or planting crews, and checking them and making sure that they understand the objective and that they're doing their job to the best of their ability, and that they are within the kind of contractual obligation. And so that's something that I've done more this year than I have in the past. But yeah, I'm pretty much Zach from Fern Gully, if you guys know that movie. But yeah, that's what I do. Any questions?
Do you actually carry a cassette tape?
No, I have cassettes, but I don't carry them with me. I don't actually listen to music when I'm out in the woods. I just like listening to nature. But it's a good throwback. Yeah.
So is what you do, David, when you say you're measuring volume and things like that, is that what the term I've heard called cruising?
That's correct. Yeah. So cruising timber, we go out, and depending on the size of the sale and then kind of more specifically the size of the unit, there'll be a certain number of surveys or plots within that area, and then we'll go out using a GPS to find those points. We'll monument it with a stake. We'll find north, and then we'll start using kind of what's called a basal area factor, which is the amount of basal area that is thought to be in the area. And so it would kind of best capture the number of trees and for the area. So we'll go and we'll either use a reloscope, which is an implement figuring out what trees are within the plot and out of the plot. More recently, I mean, in the entirety of my time with the Forest Service, we've had them. But there's an electronic reloscope called a Criterion, which is really useful, and it's digital. And so that's been really nice. We use a clinometer to check the heights of the trees, but we also have a digital laser that can be used for that as well. And the clinometer can also be used to get the slope of the area. And then if a tree looks very close to being in or out, we'll do a limiting distance on that tree, and that requires kind of getting the diameter of breast height, figuring out the slope from that diameter down to the stake, and then doing a calculation with a coefficient, and that would depend on the basal area factor that you're using for the sale. And then you'd get a number, and that number is called the limiting distance. And then you measure from that tree to the stake, and you figure out whether it's within that limiting distance or outside of it.
Thanks. It looks like we
Good.
got a question from Scott.
Hi, I'm from down on the Conejos. That is summer time. I'm down on the Conejos. Is with the spruce beetle kill, is that factoring into a lot of the harvesting on some of the trees? Are you harvesting some of the dead spruce? And then a second question, follow-up question is that gonna, with some of the spruce being stressed, is that gonna allow for not a resurgence, but allow for more of the ponderosa to take over for where some of the spruce have died?
Sure. Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, so for the first several years that I worked with the timber department, we were setting up what they called salvage sales. And so we were only targeting dead Engelmann spruce. And those were timber sales. And so a lot of those trees, although they're dead because they're standing, they're not decaying as quickly. And so a lot of the timber is still viable for product. And that would include dimensional timber. And then as the years have progressed since the beetle kind of started doing its thing back in the early 2000s, that's where the other management types come in, which would be like the mastication and things like that. But the spruce beetle and the dead spruce that the beetles killed is absolutely being used as product. And then beyond that, it's being managed after that. So when it's no longer able to be sold, then it will be managed in a different way with like a thinning project or a mastication. And then of course, people utilize it for firewood. And then as far as your second question, we do surveys, either stocking surveys or regeneration surveys, looking at the new growth in different stands of timber. It might be in a place that's been operated on, or it may be in a place that hasn't yet been operated in. And then we'd be looking for the number of trees, the species, and then we'd be kind of comparing that to what has historically been in that area, and then using that comparison to figuring out what the best management plan is for that area. And we often work in association with archaeologists, especially in timber sales, but also in mastication units, with hydrologists, because they're what we call stream management zones or riparian management zones, or areas in which we have to make sure that both we are aware, the loggers aware, and then that often means that we buffer those areas so they're outside of the sale area, even though they're within the area.
I started talking without my mute button being shut off. One other consideration too, Scott, that we're seeing nowadays that in the early days of my career, we didn't, is that there are seemingly vegetation changes going on in post-disturbance environments. And what that means is maybe a timber sale, maybe a fire. And we're seeing where some of those areas are starting to come back with a different vegetative scheme. You brought up, are those spruce gonna maybe turn into ponderosa forests? I think that's a very clear possibility depending on the elevation right now. But, if you have the crystal ball, man, bring it out, because we won't really know those areas until we start seeing that natural revegetation itself. Our shop does a lot of planting in post-burn and post-sale environments. Well, probably less so in the post-sale environments. I think there's somebody on that might be able to correct me on that, but hopefully we can restock in a manner that is consistent with what we do in the forest plan too. So there's a lot going on there. That's the different management types that David's talking about. We've got a lot of tools in our toolbox to continue to form the vegetation into that desired state that our forest plan dictates. So another question, Scott?
Yeah, I've seen the results of the fire that was down around Osier in the 1800s, and that's still, it amazes me how long impact a fire has on an area like Osier. And I think the fire was almost 150 years ago and still evident down there and several other places that I've seen over the years. And that's all I'd say about that. The long-term impact of fire can sure change that environment quite a bit. Where Osier was probably Osier Forest, now it's Osier Park.
It's neat that you bring that up, and in the interest of time, I'll shorten the response to that to vary this. Is we are lucky as human beings to get to see those types of things if we're bright enough to notice it, like you have in Osier area. Okay, fire's 150 years ago, but that's exactly what our forest is doing on a day-to-day basis right before our very eyes, is changing. That's the one thing that we know that our forest is doing every single day. It's changing. Sometimes the forest changes drastically with some sort of disturbance like a wildfire. And so, yeah, those of us that notice those things, I think we're better for it. Good comment, Scott. And we do need to get to another panelist here because there's a lot more to talk about. So any other quick questions for David? Let's maybe put them in the chat if you can, and we'll get Kirby on the board now.
Hey, last but certainly not least, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Hello, I'm Kirby Wagner. I'm a wilderness trails technician with the Forest-Wide Non-Motorized Trail Crew. We're based out of Creed, but we work in all 3 districts, which is a lot this year. So our day-to-day are focusing on our non-motorized trails, and particularly wilderness trails. Marv and Adrian kind of covered a lot of what we do in clearing. We're very focused, especially with how the forest is changing, as Greg was saying, with making sure our trails are open and accessed, which in wilderness is particularly important because if those trails aren't getting used, there's so many miles that they kind of maintain themselves as long as they have traffic on them, but they always, we need to have people out there to keep the trails going. And we like to make sure that people are safe and having a good time and able to enjoy the wilderness, because the more they enjoy it, the more they value it as a resource. We're primarily working with crosscut saws and also hand saws to do a lot of our clearing work. Because we're working within the bounds of the Wilderness Act, so there's very, very little motorized work that we're doing. A lot of it's on foot, a lot of it's backpacking, a lot of it's spending time out in the field. It is very heartening to hear how much fun all of the other specialists here have out in the field, because we spend so much time out there, it starts to feel a lot like work and a lot less like fun. And it's nice to hear everyone, being so appreciative of their time out in the field and enjoying our forest, because it brings back that sense of like, this is really cool. I really like being out there. We occasionally do get to not just cut trees out of the trail and work on some big projects. Last year, we built a really long, really tall retaining wall on the Alder Bench Trail, working with the motorized crew. This year, we partnered with a group of the Amish community from the San Luis Valley to restructure a long section of the Weminuche Pass Trail, which had gotten eroded extremely badly. It was probably about 5-6 foot deep at certain points. So we worked with the Amish community to build water bars and some trail armoring above that section, and then fill in that trail section with locally found materials, all using non-motorized equipment, crosscut saws, hand axes, hand tools, mules. So that was a lot of fun. And then we have a big final end of the year project, which will actually be one of our closer to the front country ones on the Ute Boardwalk. That's been a long time coming, but we're working with San Luis Valley Go Outside and I think SGMA as well to help rebuild that section and get it a lot safer and a lot easier to use for the public. This is the best part of our job. We spend a lot of time together. The 3 people that are on the crew all live up here in Creed together, and then we work together. And so if you don't like who you work with, it's going to be a tough job. But we have a great crew, really talented folks who are really have a great wilderness ethic and put in a lot of miles. This year, we're kind of wrapping up our backpacking season as things get really cold. So we're going over our big accomplishments this year. We've cleared, well, as best as our count is, about 12 trees shy of 2,000 trees off of our trails in all 3 of our districts. That's divided between 900 trees off of the Divide trails, 400 trees off of the Swatch trails, and 700 trees off the Canejos Peaks trails. I would say all but 100 of those are all by hand, which leads to my probably favorite thing of this year is, as you can imagine, using crosscut saws, it's slow going. So we try to not have to cut a tree too many times. So we had a really, really fun one when you get to use your brain finally, and you spend so much time walking and cutting, and we have to really make some crazy structures sometimes to get bowls of trees off of the trail. So we had with one tree in Canejos Peaks on the South Fork Canejos Trail. It was probably 30 inches in diameter on one side, 26 on the other, and we cut. It was suspended diagonally to kind of like a long angle across the trail, about 6 feet on the air on one side, about 4 feet in the air on the other. And so we pretty much had no choice but to cut about a 25-foot long segment out of it, and then build, using more local materials, a ramp to get it over another tree and then down, which are always exciting when you've spent, 2.5 hours doing something really slow, to then have the whole, 2-ton section of tree just come rolling off the trail. It's a job where you get to watch what you do make an impact, sometimes in a big violent way and sometimes in a very slow plodding way. But it is nice to see that you're making a difference. Yeah, I mean, I want to just chirp in with so many of the other folks who've been on this panel saying that they're AmeriCorps alums. I started out as an AmeriCorps alum as well. I was on chainsaw crew, actually led a chainsaw crew, got into conservation that way. And it's great to see how many folks are coming up from being volunteers to then being on the forest. And I really like seeing that around. So remember to thank your foresters, but also remember to thank those volunteers because they put up with a lot. And yeah, so any questions from any of you, anyone in chat?
How'd it go with all the rain this summer?
The rain was a lot. This has been a big change. We're kind of used to our monsoon seasons being fairly predictable, but like Greg said, the forest is always changing. Climate's changing. So we spend a lot of time working through it. You get wet, you kind of keep going, you stay warm because you're working. The numbers speak for themselves. We cleared 138 miles of trail, probably walked close to 300 of them. So it's not like we're hiding. But you do have to take into consideration, most of y'all have office schedule and 9 to 5, and sometimes we have to work around when the weather allows it. We've also had to run from a lot of lightning this year, which has been entertaining. We obviously are striving to stay safe and fit all the recommendations, but sometimes you get up on that pass and a storm comes rolling in and you're holding that 5 foot long crosscut. And you really learn how to hike fast. You get moving real quick.
How often do you guys run overnight trips going out to the wilderness? That's quite a ways, right?
All the time. So we just finished our last backpacking trip down in Cañejos Peaks, actually working back on that South Fork Trail, finishing up Rio Azul over and down again. And so we're usually on a 4 10-hour day schedule. This year has been weird because having to go all the way down to Cañejos, that kind of cuts in to our time on foot because there's so much driving. But yeah, we've had 2 weeks, I think, where we weren't backpacking outside that early part of the year when we're snowed in and we can't be out and camping. You eat a lot of ramen, you eat a lot of tuna. You get really used to eating a lot of ramen and a lot of tuna.
That's awesome, Kirby.
Thank you.
Brings back a lot of good memories, man. I started my career 29 years ago on a trail crew, so it brings back a lot of great memories. Going out on Monday, coming in on Thursday, wet and happy that you did some cool things out there, right?
Plus, you never have to worry about what you eat, so
right.
Keep eating.
That is great. Well, I'd like to open it up, Scott and Dave and Rachel, one last chance for questions for our panelists. These guys are just incredible. As I mentioned, they're the ones that get they make the rubber meet the road for the Forest Service. I can't say enough about our seasonal work crews, and any last minute questions for them, and then we'll probably wrap this thing up. It's one of the longer ones we've had, and I've enjoyed it immensely.
So the South Fork, we went up until the Canyon Rincon junction, and then we were trying to work down from Rio Azul. One of the realities of being a shared crew, and there are 3 of us, is that sometimes we don't get everything done. So that trail probably has about a 2-mile section past Canyon Rincon that is really difficult to pass. Another thing about wilderness trails is the variables. With the amount of rain we've had this year, there have been a lot of combined resource damage from stock and cattle, and then we've also had a lot of just natural disaster kind of stuff, big washouts. So there's a couple sections on that South Fork Trail that have washed out fairly badly. One probably about a half mile before the Canyon Rincon junction is probably about a 6-foot deep hole in the trail. The first 5 miles of that trail, they're beautiful. and really good fishing. So, but also very busy. A lot of hunters out there right now.
Right on. Thanks for that, Kirby. Any last minute questions? Otherwise, I'm gonna let Hannah wrap this up with our drawing and find out who won fabulous prizes.
Hey, I
Yeah.
just wanted to, oh, go ahead.
No, you go for it, Dave.
I was just going to say, I wanted to thank everyone for your efforts on behalf of our forest. Even when you're not hearing it, there's a lot of forest users that really appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you all for taking the time to join us tonight, whether you're speaking or listening in. We appreciate it. We will have this program recorded and put up on YouTube. It will be on the San Juan Mountains Association YouTube if you want to share it around. And so thanks again to our speakers who took their time out of their very busy schedule and coming out of the woods to share what they do with us. So this month we had our prize winner was Dave Jones. Thank you for joining us, and I'll be in touch about how you can pick up your prize for this month. And we will be back here next month. We are hoping to have some speakers and sort of in theme with hunting season, all about our ungulates on the forest, kind of the behavior and biology of them. We haven't completely confirmed that, but that's what we're hoping. We'll be right back here talking about something at least in October on the 19th. So we hope you'll join us then. And thanks again, everyone, for joining. We hope you all enjoyed it. If you have any last questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we can always pass them along to the folks who would be able to answer them for you.